And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most urgent topics in the never dull world of Indiana basketball. This is our 128th edition of Assembly Call Radio and is our 520th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, June 27th, 2019. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. Jared has the night off, and let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And this week's banner moment relates to basically the biggest and some might argue the only piece of IU news this week, which is an opening on the coaching staff following the departure of Ed Schilling. Now, in no way is this a celebration of Schilling leaving, as we certainly wish him all the best wherever he ends up next. But it does represent a really big opportunity for Archie Miller to make the first change to his coaching staff since arriving in Bloomington. We don't even need to look outside of the Big Ten to find an example of just how impactful a new assistant coach can be. Michigan's addition of Luke Yaklich, whose name I always butcher, helped a team that had a proven offensive track record improve tremendously on the defensive end, culminating in a 2-year stretch that saw Michigan go a combined 28-10 in the Big Ten, win a Big Ten tournament title, advance to one Sweet 16, and earn an appearance in the national title game in the other. There are no shortage of suggestions on the wish list of IU fans, which we'll discuss a bit more in a few minutes. And whether Archie can find the offensive version of Yaklich remains to be seen, but it does represent a chance to infuse the program with new energy, new knowledge, and potentially a new approach. And if all goes well, that may be a turning point we look back on down the line if IU is, in fact, able to hang another banner. With that, let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my right, he is our longtime student intern, a native of Chicago, and a young man who knows more about Northwestern basketball than any human ever should. He is Michael Dugan. Michael, it's great to have you back on the show. What are your thoughts on the last week in IU basketball?
That is not the first time I've heard that, but no, yeah, good to be back. I think first and foremost, you've got to talk about the Ed Schilling thing. And I think the first thing that jumped out to me was the timing. Andy, we were talking about this. We'll talk about it again. The timing is it's interesting. It's not often you see this in the last week of June, pretty much halfway through the off season. It seems a little random to me. And obviously there was, some reason for it that we don't know, something behind the scenes. But I completely agree with everything you said, and we have to look at this moving forward. It's a big opportunity for Archie to nail this. There's a pretty glaring hole in terms of what the roster looks like right now, who produced where last season going into this upcoming season on one side of the ball. And I think that this presents Archie with an opportunity to go get somebody who can help the team out on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe not a full innovator, but someone who can help these guards maybe create more shots off the dribble, someone who can help with free throw shooting. There are a number of things they can work on specifically on the offensive side of the ball, but I think above everything else, above being an Indiana guy, for example, I think they need to go after somebody who's got some experience in improving, finely tuning, and reworking offenses a little bit. I think that's the most important thing right now that Archie has to look at in a candidate.
I would agree, yes, and that will definitely be something that we'll talk about more, and what the right characteristics really are, as opposed to maybe what everybody wants. But with that, to my left, we've got a senior writer for the Big Lead coming back from a few-week hiatus from the show, proud native of San Diego, and he has already submitted his resume to be considered for the now vacant IU assistant coaching position that we have spent the bulk of the show talking about so far. He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what's your rant this week? Or is this just like a like campaign platform scenario where you're going to use this time to extol your virtues to the potential hirers for this position?
Archie, call me, buddy. Yeah, I think it has to be the Ed Schilling thing, has to be what we talk about. And I think that if you are looking for someone, and I think the timing, you mentioned that, Michael, it is odd timing. And I think that if he's making the time, if the timing is now, I think Archie must have a pretty good idea of at least a candidate or three that he knows he can get, that he likes. I mean, because you don't make that move now, you make it at the end of the season if there's a problem. Clearly there were some scholarship offers that went out, and then Schilling was pushed out. And I don't want to say pushed out, because I think that it doesn't seem like there's any bad blood coming out of this. Usually we hear whispers about that. It just seems like it wasn't a fit. And I've heard a lot from people talking about, it needs to be an IU guy. Now, look, that's always favorable. You want to get a guy who has something to do with IU, or has a connection, or that maybe knows the program, knows the Big Ten, all that stuff, knows Indiana recruiting. But quite frankly, not at the expense of not getting the best guy. What they should do is go out and get the best coach to fill that position. And if he happens to have IU connections, great, that's awesome. But if you can get somebody who's even better, regardless of their connections, obviously you want to know somebody who knows the state. You want to get somebody who knows the Big Ten, who knows what life is like at IU and things like that. And or life is like at a big program, I would say. That would be preferable. If he has Indiana ties, fantastic. I think all of us would love if he went out and got Dane Fife. Now, Dane Fife's got a pretty great situation at Michigan State. I don't know if he's leaving anytime soon. A guy like Michael Lewis, who's now at UCLA, he's probably just moved out there and probably doesn't want to come back and move around. And so, I mean, those are the names that have been mentioned a little bit. So we'll see. But what I think is going to have to happen is Archie's going to find somebody, as Michael said, who can help on offense. Maybe a guy who can help with shooting. Maybe a guy who can help with, recruiting Indiana, putting another foot down in recruiting Indiana, Louisville, Ohio, the region. But other than that, I really don't have a problem with letting Schilling go. And a lot of people are saying that he was really the Indiana connection on the staff. This staff has Indiana connections because this staff has been here now. And so these high school coaches all know Archie now. They all know the other guys on the staff. And so that worry is kind of gone. Yeah, at the beginning, it really helped when he came to have Ed Schilling, who knew all of the coaches in the state. By now, Archie knows those guys. And by now, Archie has those connections on his own. And so do the rest of the guys on the staff. So do all the, recruiting guys on the staff that are, sort of below the line members, not full-time staff members, but like support staff guys. They're all connected now. And it made a lot of sense to have a guy like Schilling in the beginning, but now they've kind of built those connections themselves and they've recruited Indiana well. So I think that we're going to see what Archie's mindset is moving forward by who he hires and not necessarily even who he hires, but who he goes after. And I'm sure we'll get word that he's looking at certain guys. And hopefully this is just something that gets resolved quickly because you are in the last week of June and pretty soon these guys are going to be on, ready to start ramping up for the season. So you'd like to have a guy in town and working with the players and getting to know the players before the season starts.
All right. Well, here's what we're going to talk about this week. Obviously, as all three of our intros alluded to, we're going to talk a lot about Ed Schilling's departure and what we're looking for in a potential replacement. We'll hit on a handful of recruiting news and scholarship offers that have gone out, including one that may or may not have gone out. And then I want to get Ryan and Michael's thoughts on Romeo going to the Celtics since they were not with us last week during our draft night show. And then talk a little bit about Juwan signing to play Summer League with the Jazz, which we did not know at the time that we recorded last week. And finally, we'll answer as many of your questions as we can get to. We got some good ones this week, as we always do, so we'll try to squeeze in as many of those as we can at the end. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Do you ever feel like ticketing websites make getting to the event difficult on purpose? It's as if they're so big they feel like they can get away with not caring about the customer experience. But not SeatGeek. SeatGeek cares desperately about the satisfaction of their customers, which is why a quick glance at the App Store shows over 50,000 five-star reviews. Why? Because SeatGeek delivers a better process for buying tickets. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web, and then they rate each deal on a scale of 1 to 10. And the user interface communicates it all clearly by displaying tickets on an interactive seat map, so you can see right where they are, and by using a color-coded system for value. Green dots mean good deals, red dots are overpriced. Oh, and every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It's by far the fastest and easiest way to find tickets. For us, we're looking to go to an FC Cincinnati game here in the next couple of weeks. Definitely have already looked at SeatGeek to try to scout out what's out there. And there are a number of Cubs fans getting ready to invade my fair city of Cincinnati as the Reds and Cubs meet this weekend. So I'd encourage anybody looking for tickets there to check that out on SeatGeek as well. And best of all, SeatGeek will even give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. So download the SeatGeek app today and use promo code Assembly for $10 off on your first purchase. That's promo code Assembly for $10 off on your first purchase. All right, guys. So let's talk a little bit more about the Ed Schilling departure. And we've alluded to a lot of this, but we did get a question from MGDOS79 on Twitter. With Schilling leaving, does IU need to hire an Indiana guy to replace him? I think this is the most common question that everybody has seen. I think it's a question that was posed when the job was open that Archie Miller got, and how important that really is. There's been a lot of debate about that. And really up until now, to me, it didn't make sense to have that debate because there was no change on the staff imminent. The staff was really in place. So to talk about, do you need an IU guy on the staff at that point didn't really mean a whole lot.
Well, technically they do have one, Derek Elston.
Well, they have Elston, but as far as in an assistant coaching capacity. So Michael, I'll go to you first on this. And Ryan, you mentioned it a little bit. I mean, where on the scale of importance does IU guy slot in for you?
I think, well, I want to say that Ryan's points earlier were spot on. These high school coaches,
don't tell him that. Don't encourage him.
Okay, Ryan, you're completely.
Love you, Mike. Love you, buddy.
No, Archie knows these guys, these high school coaches, these guys around the state. So I don't think it really matters as much now as it did when Archie came in to have a guy like Ed Schilling on the staff. I think if you say they need to hire an Indiana guy, that would mean that that's the most important trait that you would associate with a candidate over everything else. If they need to hire a guy that matches this, and then everything else is secondary. And I don't think that's smart. I think to hire a guy, if he's an Indiana guy, but he can't really, help innovate or help to improve or finely tune an offense, then he's probably not going to be much help on the offensive side of the ball. And then what do you just hang your hat on the fact that he's an Indiana guy? It'd be great. Sure. If he can help the offense and help these guys at the free throw line and beyond the arc, which is even a foot further back now, then, and he's also an Indiana guy, then fantastic. But I just think that this program and this team and this roster, they have bigger fish to fry than getting a guy who's from Indiana. I don't want to be coming down too harsh on that stance, but I just think there are more important things right now than checking off that box. I just do.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to Crimson Cast today, and they were talking about this a little bit from an Indiana player standpoint. That was always the criticism of need more Indiana guys, more guys from the state, and things like that. And Galen brought up a point that I feel like I've probably made at some point on the show, that if you're winning, the winning doesn't feel worse because it's not an Indiana guy. If you're winning, the winning doesn't feel worse because there's not an IU guy on the bench. It's a convenient thing to bring up when you're not. And it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean the pendulum should swing the other way and say, like, you don't, like, that shouldn't matter at all. I do think it does matter to a lot of people. And if that breaks a tie between two guys who are pretty even, then so be it. But it doesn't need to, kind of like you said, Michael, be the, saying that elevates that above everything else on the list of characteristics they need to have. So Ryan, with that as backdrop, what do you think is like the most important thing that a candidate needs to have for this team in particular, not just in general as an assistant coach, because there's a lot of things you might look for there, but what does this team need the most out of an assistant that they would bring on?
You would like to have an offensive minded guy or somebody who has experience in teams that have great offenses. Now, look, does that necessarily mean that's what Archie's going to go for? No, the most important thing is staff chemistry, is that he gets along with everybody else. That is honestly, you can have above average coaches, not top level amazing coaches, but above average coaches. If you have great staff chemistry, that can elevate a team from good to great, because the team mimics the staff. The team, the relationships they build, a lot of that is fostered by the staff. And if they see the staff quarreling or not getting along, they check out sometimes, or it doesn't fit for them. It takes an extraordinary team to overcome a lack of staff chemistry. And I'm not saying that Indiana can't have an extraordinary team. I'm just saying it's again something you're fighting against if you don't have that kind of thing. So that's number one, is how does he fit in with the other guys? These guys spend so much time together. They have to get along, and they have to work well together, even more importantly than getting along. But it is like a family. Guys are going to argue. Can they handle arguing against each other and not have that turn negative and turn ugly? They're going to fight. They're going to argue. They're going to bash heads. Can they walk away from that? But yeah, I think that certainly skill development, offensive, mindedness, maybe a guy who has a background working with shooters. Those are the most important things if I'm looking at this. And then, of course, secondary to that is, of course, fitting in and being part of this group together. Filling a hole that might be there personality wise, and then on top of that. Yeah, if it's an Indiana guy, awesome. If it's somebody who knows the region, even better. But yeah, putting that at the top of the list is just silly. The same way it is when you're looking for a head coach. You hire the most qualified, best candidate for what you need. If they happen to be in Indiana, have Indiana ties, great. If not, they'll get Indiana ties very quickly.
Yeah. So I'm gonna circle back to the Indiana guy thing just because I think some of these candidates are worth. We don't need to get into a ton of detail on these. So Dane Fife is one that's come up. I think that one is pretty difficult for a number of reasons. Kent Sterling put something out and basically said you don't hire the guy that could potentially replace you, which I think is an interesting perspective. I also think Fife, by all accounts, seems to be being groomed in some capacity to take over for Tom Izzo. So I think that's
extremely happy there.
Fairly tough to walk away from. The Michael Lewis thing would be interesting because he's used to the Big Ten from being at Nebraska, knows IU, knows Indiana, just took a job on the UCLA staff. That seems like you probably wouldn't walk away from that, but we've definitely seen coaches, turn away from a new job pretty quickly. AJ Guyton's another one. I think he's at Loyola Maryland right now, maybe his second year there, first or second year. Those are thrown out. Calbert Cheney, who I think has been out of coaching for a couple years. Obviously, Jared and I would be incredibly happy about that.
Yeah, a little too happy.
Saw Greg Graham thrown out based on some comments that he made when Alex and Jared interviewed him on podcast on the Brink. He's out in Rhode Island, I believe, at a high school or prep school there.
Basically, every IU player who can
just go down a roster
has ever shot.
Go down a roster. Yes, that's correct.
Because Jordan Hulls is still in the middle of his playing career, guys. He's not going to coach.
He's tearing it up. He's tearing it up over there.
I think eventually Jordan Hulls will be a coach. I mean, it's family. And he'd be a great candidate. But yeah, he's still playing, guys. So let's not retire him before he's ready.
Yeah. So do any of those guys that fall under the umbrella of IU guy stand out to you as even a reasonable chance to be on based on their different circumstances? Ryan, I'll go to you first on that.
Well, I mean, Michael Lewis would be one. I mean, if he hasn't really moved out and gotten involved at UCLA yet, I know he's obviously out there, but I mean, if he hasn't gotten fully, attached to that program, yeah, sure, maybe you give him a call. But again, we can go through all these guys. I just get the feeling that Archie knows who he's going to go for and knows who he wants, and I don't think it's going to take a long time. I think this is something that he's telegraphed for a long time to himself and figured this out. And I just don't think he fires and lets Schilling go now unless there's a plan in place, or at least, a plan that he thinks he can execute. And it wouldn't make sense to do it now unless, we saw a lot of offers go out recently. Maybe he thinks he can recruit without him. And that was the, just sort of the thing. It's like with all these offers and with all the interest they're getting, maybe he's not that important to the staff. So I have a tough time feeling like Archie doesn't already know who he wants and know what he wants to get. But even if he doesn't, yeah, sure. Michael Lewis is a guy who makes sense. Dane Fife does not. Dane Fife, quite frankly, is a Hoosier. I think he should stay there because it's a great position for him, and I want to see him succeed. Coming to Indiana, I'm not talking about this in a program way, but he's basically being groomed as a coach in waiting. He comes to IU. He's going to be working for the guy who most people expect to be here for a long time. So it feels like a step back as far as his position on the, on the coaching staff. He would just be one of the guys as opposed to the guy who's eventually going to take over. And yeah, Calbert's been out of coaching for a while, I believe. I think you're right on that. AJ Guyton doesn't really seem like he's moved up very quickly. He should probably handle a job at a big college before he is ready for IU, unless you just interview him and he blows you away. And we've interviewed him before and he's a great guy, but is he a guy who's going to move the needle with kids in this state? So I don't know. But I have a hard time believing that Archie didn't have this all planned out and have his next move ready.
Yeah. All right, Michael, I'll give you the last word on this. Any of those names stand out to you? Any other names that you've kind of heard scouring the interwebs for different ideas? I think everybody's been brought up. We had a question that jokingly, and I did get a good laugh out of it, suggest Brad Stevens. So,
yeah, I mean, you'll have to imagine he's getting the call, right?
Yeah. I mean, he hasn't said no. You got to make him say no, right?
That's exactly right. No, there's no one that jumps off the page. And no, I want to just quickly echo Ryan's point. If there's no plan for who Archie is going to get, there is at least a plan of attack. And if there's not a plan of attack for the kind of guy or names of guys he's going to get, then there are probably bigger fish to fry and bigger issues there. But no, there's very probably someone or a couple of people he has in mind that is going to fill a role that he is very well aware needs to be filled. So I have no idea who that's going to be. But I have a very strong gut feeling that Archie Miller does. And quite frankly, this might surprise people, but in this position, his opinion is a little more important than mine. So I trust he'll make the best possible decision, of course.
All right. Well, we'll see. And like I said, I like you guys have said, I think for a variety of reasons, it feels like the news will come quickly about who it is. Both from does he have a good idea before this actually happens, who he's going to get, and also from where we are in the recruiting calendar standpoint, I think it becomes relatively important to get somebody in place quickly. So who knows, may have news on that as early as next week's show to talk about, and we'll see what happens from there. But coming up on the assembly call, we're going to talk a little bit about some recruiting news that we saw over the past week, and we'll talk a bit more post-draft reaction about Romeo and Juwan with Ryan and Michael. So that's next year on the assembly call. Stick with us. All right, welcome everybody on YouTube. Despite the fact that I told you guys I'm actually going to remember to start the timer this time.
Oh,
I absolutely did not.
Oh, for the love of
whatever, you get the B team host. This is what you get.
According to YouTube, we started like 20 minutes and 56 seconds ago.
Okay, that's about what I had it at about. I had it at about 2 minutes, so that's pretty good. All right, I'll say about 20-30 for that segment then. With whatever, because I think there's a little bit of silence at the beginning. All right, see, good job, Ryan. All right,
I'm not saving you on the next round because I won't be able to do that quick math.
Well, I know. I'll try to do better. I usually only forget the first segment, so we'll see.
Oh, it's good to be back, folks.
Isn't it though? We'll let everybody know next week. We may record on Wednesday night since next Thursday is the 4th of July. So
yeah, I have stuff to do that night.
Yeah. Well, yeah, at some point we'll figure that out, but we'll definitely let everybody know. But it will likely, at the very least, not be at the normal. Even if it's Thursday, it would be earlier and not at the normal time. It may not be Thursday at all, and we'll figure that out from there. Got to catch me before I have too many pops that day, because otherwise, who knows what might happen.
Just be a slurred mess.
You don't know that.
I'm gonna know that in a few weeks when you're out in San Diego.
That is entirely.
Did you guys find a new place to stay?
Yeah, we did. We did. Yeah, that's it was great. 2 out of the 3, fell through within about a week. But
awesome.
Yeah, we're back in business.
Exactly what you want.
If it happens again, we might have some issues. But who knows? All right, so we'll hit these recruits quickly, and then we'll kind of talk through Romeo and Juwan. Like I said, I think we got plenty of questions, so however, we don't need to drag this out any more than we want to. But
cool,
we'll go from there. I see people in the chat asking Coach about his. I forgot why he wasn't going to be on, but now looking at the questions that are in the chat, I'm quickly reminded. So, Coach, hope you're doing all right, and we will get started here in a minute. It's funny that so there's a Jalen Bridges. It is amazing. I mean, I know people joke about Jalen Rose really making that, starting that name, making it popular. It is unbelievable how when you scroll through the 24/7 rankings, how many guys are named Jalen or some form of it. It's
Shaquille. Insane. Nobody was ever named Shaquille.
No.
Shaquille and then Kobe. You're seeing variations of Kobe come up too. Kobe White.
It's also putting a lot of pressure on your.
Yeah, no kidding.
But especially the Shaquille one, because there's not really another.
No one's ever going to be that guy.
Yeah, nobody's going to be that guy. What are you going to do? Oh well. All right. I'll actually start the timer this time. I really will.
Sweet.
And welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and Michael Dugan, and wanted to touch on the less heralded news of the week from an IU perspective, and that is on the recruiting front. A handful of scholarship offers went out. We'll start with one that may or may not have gone out, depending upon what you read or who you believe, but there was some news. Austin Van Zyl, I'm going to assume is how that's said, could be Van Zyl, basically tweeted out on Wednesday that an offer was made There have been some reports since then that is not actually the case. So I'll leave everybody to figure out what's true and not true. But just some news on him. I read this, I think, on the Daily Hoosier, and I thought I had pulled this in here, but I apparently did not. So he's 20-year-old. I think was part of the class of 2017. I want to say he's played the last 2 seasons overseas in France's first division. And so in 2017-18, he averaged 5.7 points, 2.3 rebounds, 2.1 assists. Did not shoot the ball particularly well, shot under 30% overall. The past season, points rose a little bit to over 6 a game. Rebounds was 4, assists 2.8. Again, shot the ball really poorly. There was some mention that it was attributed to injury. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a good time to weave in this question from Nick Bannister. He's actually the one who asked if Brad Stevens was the heavy favorite to replace Ed Schilling.
Duh.
Yeah, obviously.
But it's your first call, right?
His question was, would adding Austin Van Zyl make the team that much better, or will it just lead to a scholarship being used up that could have been filled by a 2020 or 2021 recruit? Ryan, what are your thoughts on?
Well, if Van Zyl comes in as a guy who's going to play for 1 year or something like that, and clearly he's already played professionally, I know that he's maintained his eligibility by playing in France, but if he just came in and wanted to do a year of college basketball or something, he's from New York, I know that. I think that it'd be fine, but if he's coming in to take a 4-year scholarship, I'm not down with that, because it doesn't look like he has the ability. I mean, his only offer is from Marshall. This isn't a guy who is, maybe the numbers don't tell the whole story because he's playing professional basketball and all this. Teams have seen this guy and they're not exactly throwing offers at him. So, I'm not too high on it unless they're really worried about having another ball handler. He's not a guy who's going to shoot the ball particularly well. It doesn't look like. Maybe there is an injury there we don't know about. But again, if this guy were real good, he'd have more offers, because his name's been out there for a while. I've heard people talking about him since the season ended, about IU and some other schools kind of poking around with him. But yeah, I just don't think – I think that teams have watched tape on him and they're not that impressed and they're not offering. And, I just think if he's going to take a 4-year scholarship, then – that's not something I'm willing to do. If it's one that's going to be open in a year, and there's no harm in filling that scholarship for a year, one of those open ones for a year and then open next year. So yeah, I would say no if it's going to be a long-term thing. If it was going to be a 1-year thing, sure, why not? I don't think it can hurt, but again, depends how long he's going to be here.
Yeah, it was kind of odd. I did hear his name, feels like a month or so ago, and then had kind of dropped off, and then this resurfaced this week. Certainly want to make sure he maintains his eligibility. We don't need another Guy Marc Michel situation on our hands by any stretch of the imagination. But Michael, anything to add on the
guys playing in France, man?
Anything to add on the potential of using a scholarship on him? Do you think he's really somebody who could help this year's team, or is it better to bank the scholarship and see what's in the years to come?
I mean, there's nothing really in terms of the statistics, which obviously that doesn't tell the whole story, that jump out at you. Not a very efficient shooter, not a great 3-point shooter, 2 things that I think Indiana really needs. He does bring, like you said, he's been playing professionally, so he does bring some experience to the table. And it's a body that's filling a scholarship that, who knows what else would be going at that scholarship, at least for this upcoming season. But in terms of the long run, I haven't seen anything in my research of this guy that has really jumped out to me to suggest, oh yeah, he can really help this team, grow in this aspect or something. So, short term, 1 year, I guess, sure, why not? But I don't really see anything right now that would suggest he would be likely to be very beneficial to the team in the long run. I could be wrong, but there's nothing that would suggest that up to this point.
Yep, I would agree. The other scholarship offers that went out this week, there were 2 in the 2020 class. Jalen Bridges, 6'7" small forward from West Virginia, who's ranked 81st in the 24/7 composite, and Jamin Brakefield, who's ranked 33rd in the 24/7 composite. He's a 6'8" power, listed as a power forward at Huntington Prep. He's a guy, they had a scouting report on 24/7 from Jerry Meyer, talked about solid size for him. As a forward, smooth athlete. There was definitely some questions about his motor, good rebounder and defender when playing with passion. So, but a guy who seems like he has some good upside. And then in the 2021 class, Trey Patterson, who's ranked 26th, He's a 6'7" small forward from New Jersey. If you're starting to see a pattern here in terms of the size and position of these guys, it's because there is one.
I think Archie likes 6'7" forwards with versatility.
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting because that's the kind of guy who, if you look down this year's roster, there's not a whole lot of if Jerome Hunter's not healthy. So it's clearly
not for lack of trying, though.
Yes, exactly. But it talked about Trey Patterson, ranked as high as he is nationally because of his versatility and college-ready basketball body. This is from Eric Watkins of 24/7. Good strength of the stage and the frame to add more. Good ball handler and passer. Can knock down the 3-point shot or use the size to get to the mid-range or get to the rim. So sounds like an interesting guy there. He's from New Jersey. And Bryce Hopkins is the other one, a 6'7" small forward from Illinois. Again, versatile, seems like decent size, came from the same AAU program as Juwan. I couldn't find where he was ranked specifically, so I'm assuming he's a little bit further down in their rankings. But other than the fact that so many of them are playing or roughly the same size, anything to take away from any of those offers that stand out to you? Ryan, I'll let you go first.
Apparently it was the week to offer small forwards, I guess. But you're looking at it and it looks like they're looking for versatile athletes on the wing. And that makes sense with what this team doesn't have right now. As you said, with Jerome Hunter's future up in the air and a big question mark, Romeo's gone. He was a 6'6" wing who could get you, points in the paint, get you, hit a three occasionally when he was healthy. But it fits that kind of mold of a guy who can come off the wing and score for you. And that seems like what all these guys are, and that they're all versatile. In the Troy Williams, Jerome Hunter sort of mold of just a guy who's a big wing who can score going to the basket and needs to work on his shot. And I think that's just what this team needs. It's what they're missing in the pipeline, really. And I think we're going to see them go after that kind of guy this year. They've got guys up front. And so I think that they're going to really need to build out the wings and the guard spots moving forward.
Michael, anything stand out to you about any of those guys in particular, or just the kind of guy that IU's offering at this point?
Well, I think all these guys cumulatively at least kind of check basically every single box you can for an athletic wing that you would like to play on a Big Ten roster. I liked what I saw from Jalen Bridges. Obviously, these guys are still a year away. Some of these guys, the other guys like Patterson and Hopkins, are 2 years away. I liked what I saw on Jalen Bridges. His shot wasn't the prettiest thing I've ever seen, but he shot at a pretty decent clip. He looks athletic. He looks like he's got a frame that could really easily fill out. So I liked what I saw on him, and I have to give a quick shout out to the local kid, Bryce Hopkins. Fenwick High School, went to the same high school as Corey Maggette, if you guys want to look anything into that at all. So there's that. There's
Corey Maggette, highly underrated NBA player, Corey Maggette.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the name on the front of the jersey when he played for them kind of hindered that a little bit with the Clippers. But no, I think these are all fairly prototypical wings in their own way. And I think at this point, the way the roster looks for Indiana, any of them would be a nice addition. Obviously, this is, again, another year away, but there's nothing that you guys haven't said. No.
Yeah, definitely. If you spin forward and look from a roster composition standpoint, you would, feel like even looking into next year, you'd still have Al, Rob, and Armand in the backcourt, and you've got,
you maybe need one more guard. Yeah. More
a decent stable of front court guys as well. So yeah, that does feel like the
wing scorers, wing shooters. Yeah, is really the whole, and maybe get another pure guard who can knock down a shot too. I mean, I think that's really what you're looking to fill out there. The front court looks set. I think most people feel Trace Jackson Davis is going to be there for a while. Race Thompson going to be there for a while. You got Joey Brunk for 2 years. I mean, the front court guys are going to be there. So it's about developing them, getting them better, and it's about getting them help. And I think that, the wings are a great spot to look for some scoring help.
Yep. All right. Well, let's talk. I wanted to talk a little bit of post-draft thoughts. You guys were not here with Jared, Coach, and I last week, so wanted to. We got some pretty immediate reaction as Romeo got picked right before we got started. But now we're a week removed from that. So let's talk Romeo first, and I did want to hit on Juwan. So Ryan, your thoughts on Romeo going to the Celtics? Anything that's kind of come out this week after they picked him, the way he's, what he said, anything there really stand out to you?
I think Bill Simmons is an idiot. other than that, for saying that he's going to be their D-League starting combo guard. No, or G-League starting combo guard. Sorry. No, I think it's a good fit for him. There's a lot of talent on that team, a lot of young talent. Looks like after the reports today, they're going to get Kemba Walker too, who's a guy that Romeo could really learn from. He'll have to battle for playing time. There's a lot of wings on that team, guards and forwards, from Jaylen Brown to Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, if they bring him back, Marcus Smart. There's a lot of competition there for playing time. Tatum, you could even throw in that mix as sort of a 2-3. But I think that he's a guy who can find playing time there. And I think that Brad Stevens didn't draft him. He's certainly in the draft room, and he knows what he's getting. He knows Indiana, and he knows Romeo Langford, and there's no way that he didn't know what he was getting in Romeo. And I think that one good part about him going to a deep roster is maybe he can come along slowly and let that hand heal and ease his way back in. But I think it's a great fit for Romeo long term. I think that he enjoys the spotlight. I think Boston's going to give him a vibe, that same kind of vibe he got in Indiana when you make a big play, and same kind of fans, same kind of spotlight that I think he liked, but he's going to be able to ease his way in. And I think that that's because their roster is certainly stocked with young players. Will he play some in the G League? Probably. But I don't think he's going to be a guy who's spending his whole season down there. I think they're going to be very excited when they get him out there, when he's healthy. I think he's going to be exactly what they want. And by the way, we've seen Romeo work really well within a system with teammates. Brad Stevens is going to put him in a position to succeed. So I really think it's a great fit for him.
Michael, what about you? And what were your immediate thoughts after seeing him get drafted by the Celtics?
I thought it was a great fit. Look, they did it. They did their homework on him, and they didn't pick him by accident. And he's not going to directly contribute in a major way right away. They've obviously got guys like Ryan named Tatum and Brown that have solidified roles in that rotation. And this roster, at least for Boston, probably is going to see a lot of changing around this offseason, which is about to get crazy across the board.
It's going to be really interesting to see what Boston's one of the teams to watch, because Horford's leaving, Kyrie's leaving. There's going to be a huge gap there. It looks like they're getting Kemba Walker. That's not obviously set in stone, but they look like the favorites to get Kemba Walker. Are they going to make other moves there? Are they going to keep those other young guys with Kemba Walker? If they make other moves, they send away a Jaylen Brown or someone like that. That leaves a spot open for Romeo.
Absolutely. Yeah, that roster is at the very least going to see some shakeup. It might be flipped upside down by the time October, November comes around. We don't know. Regardless, I don't think Romeo is going to directly contribute in November and December in a major way. But in the long term, I think this was definitely a long-term, what is his ceiling type of pick? Can they get a lot out of him over the next 5, 6, 7 years? And the answer is absolutely. I mean, this is a 19-year-old kid who's going on to a team that has a great history with developing guards and developing guys and getting the most out of every player at every role, 1 through 8, 1 through 9 in that rotation. So I think if you're Romeo Langford, I don't really know how realistically you could have gone into a better position that had a better blend of potential for the future, ability to contribute right now, but in a limited way, and also not have these enormous expectations kind of dropped on your chest, pretty much the day you walk into that facility, like on the Magic or the Bulls or the Knicks or something like that. So I think it's as good a fit as you're going to get.
I thought my favorite fit for him was the Pacers, because I thought that he and Oladipo playing in the backcourt together, the Pacers kind of need a wing right now with the way things are shaping up for them. But again, I think it might have been bad for him to have those expectations like he did at IU. Maybe it's time for him to go and just focus on development and not focus on being, the center of attention for a while, because, maybe that'll be better for him. And then, hey, when his contract's up in a few years, maybe he comes back to Indiana. Maybe he is that guy that can do that. It certainly worked for Oladipo that way. And I think everybody would love to see him playing for the Pacers, but good for him getting drafted in the lottery. I think that there was a lot of question about that. I had heard, people were marking him maybe 20th between, 16 and 20. I had heard some teams in the 11 to 14 range were interested in him. I did not know where he would go. And the Celtics, with one of their dozen picks, it felt like, wound up taking him. And I think it's a great fit, and I think it'll be great for his development.
All right, so I wanted to touch on Juwan as well. He did not get drafted, which was not really a surprise to anybody, but did sign a contract with the Jazz. I believe the contract is just to play in the summer league for them. So again, I preface this in the break that it's almost impossible that you guys know less about NBA rosters than I do, and who's particularly the Jazz. So Ryan, what's the potential fit for him, and kind of a maybe a best case scenario for him coming out of summer league, and how he might fit in with guys that they currently have, knowing that like any other team, there's some fluctuation there with free agency getting ready.
Yeah, it's really hard to know with where their roster is right now. It's in flux, just like everybody else's, all the big ones. And this is a team that just acquired Mike Conley that could really compete for the Western Conference. I don't think they'll win it. I think a lot of people went overboard when Conley showed up there, and all of a sudden they're thinking, oh, these guys are going to be a contender for the championship. I don't think it's that far, but I think it's a solid team. And what the key for Morgan isn't looking forward, isn't looking how he fits in the roster. He's trying to get on the G League roster, maybe get a two-way contract where he can come up and down. He needs in summer league to show that he can shoot the basketball. That is the big key for him, because he's undersized for a center, and for, quite frankly, for a power forward in the NBA right now. He is undersized. He needs to be able to knock down shots. He needs to be able to score off the dribble. And those are things that he showed at IU that he needed to get better at. And so we haven't really seen Juwan play since the last game of his senior year. But I'd assume that's what he's been working overtime on. So I'm definitely going to be watching the summer league. I want to watch and see what he can bring to the table in those aspects. And it's going to be really important for him to do that, and do that quickly at summer league, because you're looking at, you have to get on the radar immediately if you want to get one of those spots and really get into a team's plans moving forward. So he's going to have to shoot the basketball. He's going to have to score off the dribble. I think we know that against the competition in the summer league, he could probably be pretty good, but he's got to show some versatility to his game.
Yeah, I think that the roster of 4s and 5s on the Jazz is it's very top heavy with Favors and Gobert right now. But after that, it's pretty random and not especially talented. I don't want to come down too harsh.
Yeah, I mean, they got rid of Jay Crowder. They got rid of, there have been some guys that have been shipped away in trades. I mean, there is room there to develop.
Absolutely.
And to find a spot.
No, that's a good way to put it. There's room to develop and find a spot. And if he can come out and knock down shots right away in summer league and impress these guys, these coaches, that he deserves a spot. I think if he can, like Ryan said, work on that jump shot, if he can score from under the rim all the way out to 22, 23 feet, that's a guy that I don't really see any issue with thinking, this is a guy that could come off the bench and contribute for an NBA team for a handful of minutes in a game. He can come in, score a couple points, grab a couple boards, get your starting 4, starting 5 a breather, and, trot out a body that you can trust to put a couple points up on the scoreboard. I think, he's undersized, and that's going to be an issue. But if he can show that he can score, I mean, he proved as much as you could as an undersized big man in the Big Ten that he could bang bodies with, Jaren Jackson and big NBA centers that were in the Big Ten for a year or two, and he can score on these guys. So I might be a little higher on him than others, and maybe probably higher than I should be, but I definitely see a path where he can carve his way into being a guy that comes off the bench, contributes a few minutes, scores a couple buckets in a couple games for an NBA team, becomes the bottom end rotation guy. I see a path.
Guys who have contracts currently for next season that he would be competing for roster spots with: Georgie Niang, Royce O'Neal, Tony Bradley, and then you've got the small forward, power forward, center combination of Gobert, Derek Favors, and Joe Ingles. So, I mean, those 3 starters, other than that, it's an empty bench, guys who haven't proven themselves. So he has a chance to get in the mix and maybe get in the mix with that G League team and prove himself and do what Thomas Bryant did. Go to the G League, prove yourself, and then get a spot on the roster. And if you're not a fit for the Jazz and they waive you and you have shown something, guess what? Somebody else is going to pick you up. Thomas Bryant is now the starting center in Washington, and he's about to get paid in restricted free agency. So the path is always there. The key is to develop it. Even if you're not doing it at the NBA level now, you can do it at that G League level put, the league, they watch those guys because they're cheap. And every time one gets waived, somebody will be willing to pick up a good one. And so that's the path that you're on right now, is to just continue to work on your game and get better.
Well, and I think that's a case where, so often it's said, it feels like a cliche, but in this case, it's true. You'd almost rather a guy like that not get drafted so he can pick where to go. And it sounds like he's picked a spot where he believes he's a good fit and sees those openings that you talked about from a roster standpoint, where, again, you're betting on yourself and saying, hey, I can prove that I can play at this level and score, defend bigger players, all the things, and shoot the ball, all the things that you guys mentioned. And if it does, he puts himself in a good position to work out. If not, you've gotten a lot of exposure in summer league to a whole bunch of other teams and systems that may figure out a way that they can fit you in. So in the end, certainly wish him all the best. And he'll be, an intriguing guy to watch for IU fans for sure in the summer league. Coming up in our third segment, we're going to answer your questions, which include one about team chemistry and another about outside shooting, an always popular topic for IU fans these days. So we'll hit those next. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Actually started the timer that time. That segment was actually longer than the first one. I know that now, since I know what the math was.
How much time we have left?
Not a ton. Calculating now. 36 seconds. That's 8, 7. About 7 minutes and 40 seconds left.
Wow, that's not much.
No, not really. Got more out of the second one than I thought we might. So, All right. So I figure we will hit, I think we'll hit the one about team chemistry, hit the outside shooting one, kind of see where we are in those. And then we'll see which one of the others to kind of slide in there.
Oh, you're not just jumping on the Greg Oden one?
We'll throw that in at the end.
That could be our go home question.
Yeah, I think so. This is IU Isaiah Thomas, though. This is not, the other one's spelled differently, correct? I assume your friend Jeremy is.
Yes, he meant I use it.
All right. I just want to, I thought so, but you never know. There was also somebody replied to him with a question about the status of Greg Oden's knees of the 10 Greg Odens. So I don't know if we'll be able to parse that part of it.
That was his law school buddy, I think.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out from there. All right. We will get started. All right. So about, I'll try to give updates in the chat of how much time we got. We got about 7 minutes and 40 seconds before I got to do the outro. So we will go from there. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and Michael Dugan. Remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. Time now for our mailbag. All questions were submitted via Twitter and our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. So this one comes in from Twitter from Swopeberry. Every convo about IU basketball has the word chemistry in it. What went wrong, and how do we know it won't be a problem next season? Michael, I'll kick this one to you first.
Oh boy, what went wrong?
Throwing him right into the fire. I like it.
Good. Wow.
No, I don't want to give Ryan the chance to talk first every time, because then we only have a certain amount of time left. So I didn't want to completely squeeze you out of the conversation entirely.
What went wrong? I don't know. I mean, something I would imagine went wrong. I have no idea what it was. And I don't even really want to speculate, but something clearly went wrong. And how do we know it's not going to happen next year? Maybe you live and you learn. Maybe you kind of hang your hat on that saying. And once you go through something, I don't know if it was an on the court thing, an off the court thing, multiple things on and off. I don't know. Something was clearly not right about halfway through the season. And maybe the guys that are coming back that went through it, kind of live with the live and you learn type of thing. And yeah, I have no idea. The answer to both questions straight up is I don't know. So.
All right, Ryan, what about you? You got any answers?
Not really. I don't know what happened. I think part of it was a really young team. Part of it was a lot of people relying on Romeo Langford. And then part of it, I think, was a lot of guys were injured and you're shuffling guys in and out. You're not getting a lot of practice time. I think that had a lot to do with it. And you don't have time in practice to develop that chemistry that maybe you want to see on the court. You saw late in the season, they started to make a run. They started to make adjustments and they started to play much better together. Just kind of ran out of the steam at the end. So, I don't know. I think that none of us will ever know the real answer, but I think that, injuries certainly played a huge role in it.
Yeah, it's a weird question. In the one sense, any player that you've heard interviewed after the season has essentially said there weren't really chemistry issues. There wasn't, some of the things going on that have been rumored. That feels good, I guess, to hear, because at this point, again, after the season, there's not really a lot of incentive to gloss over what was going on, particularly for guys who are no longer with the program. Flip side of that is something is wrong when you're losing that many games in a row. You can't kind of say there's not some issue related to that. And then if you want to swing it back the other way and kind of take the optimistic, hopeful stance, you would say, well, they must have figured it out because of the way they played down the stretch at the end of the season. So there's probably a little bit of truth in all of those areas. And I think, to the point you guys brought up, hopefully having gone through that will help a little bit. And I think I don't really view this as chemistry, but I do think from an offensive standpoint, not having the crutch of Romeo and Juwan may help things be a little bit, help there be a little bit more continuity on that end of the floor instead of standing around to wait for those guys to make plays. Puts a little bit more pressure on, but I think maybe gets more guys involved. Maybe that improves chemistry. Tough to say. This one comes from Andy Shefsky. Where or who will our outside shooting come from? Ryan, I'll go to you first on this one.
Evan Fitzner. Oh, wait, he's gone. No, I think Al Durham.
That's not a well anybody's ready to go back to. I think it's still too soon to even throw that out.
Look, Devontae Green shot 41% last year. Al Durham shot 34%. Rob Finney 31%. I think those three guys are going to shoot better this year. Demezy Anderson is an X factor. He looked pretty awful when he played last year, but he was known as a shooter. Can he develop that? Those are the guys I'm going to look for to shoot. I don't know if they will. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you, better and wish I could have a great answer for you. I think Race Thompson has the ability to shoot from the outside. It's going to all depend on how much of his game he's worked on in the offseason. But he's a guy with a nice release and gets good rotation on the ball. So he's a guy who could certainly step out and do it. And then we'll see what Armaan Franklin can do. He, like Rob Finney, is a guy who developed and got better at shooting throughout his high school career. So if that trend continues, maybe he's even better this year.
Michael Ryan named roughly half of the players on the IU roster during that. Anybody stand out to you? There certainly can't be anybody you didn't mention that would stand out to you, but anybody really stand out that you think is going to take a big step forward from a shooting perspective?
He covered all the bases. I think Devontae, I had Devontae, Al, and Rob written down. Devontae, I think, is the obvious choice to lead the charge. Al had a couple of really good 2 to 3 game stretches last year. I think Ryan just said he shot 34%. That was a mouthful, which is not terrible, not great, not terrible. If that's your best or second best 3-point shooter, I think you're going to need a couple other guys around there. Rob just over the 30% clip. He's got a really smooth jump shot. As a true freshman last year, I was impressed with the way his shot looked. He had a smooth release, and the shots that fell were beautiful. So if he can improve upon that and go up a couple percentage points, then that would seriously help. And if Demezy can come off the bench and shoot at an even remotely decent clip, in terms of efficiency clip, that's going to help Indiana a lot. I think his value playing time wise compared to what he can bring to the table and how much that helps this team as a whole next year it's enormous. I think if he can come off the bench and knock down a couple threes and you're confident in that, that's going to open up this team so much more. And I think it raises their ceiling.
All right, we'll go rapid fire a couple questions here at the end. So Ryan, don't name everybody. Just give me one. Lisa asked, who will be the team captain this year replacing JMO?
De'Ron Davis.
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. De'Ron Davis.
I'm gonna go a little bit off the board with Al Durham. I think some of the stuff you've heard about him being, the emotional leader and things like that, I think is a good one. From Jeremy McKenzie, would you rather fight one Greg Oden sized Isaiah Thomas? This is IU Isaiah Thomas, or 10 Isaiah Thomas sized Greg Odens? Ryan, go.
I'm going to go with one Greg Oden-sized Isaiah Thomas. He's going to get
Michael.
distracted and sexually harass somebody.
Wow.
I'm not sure how to follow that one up. I think the one Greg Oden-sized Isaiah Thomas is probably the obvious choice because the 10 other guys are all going to be taller than me. So I'm at a disadvantage 10 times over again.
That's fair.
There you go. This one comes intern to intern question here from Seth Tao. I don't know if there's background to this, but he asked what Michael Dugan's favorite old-time baseball name is.
There is absolutely background. I won't get into it because I think we're short on time, but the answer is easy. It is Bud Weiser, who played for the Phillies in 1915. He hit 162.
Nice.
Budweiser. That's probably the most, at least around here in the Midwest, that's probably the most baseball beer I would associate with going to a baseball game is Budweiser. At least it's up there. So it's a match made in heaven if you ask me.
No Three Finger Brown, huh? I like Three Finger.
Mordecai Three Finger Brown is up there. He's on the podium, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Nice. I'll throw out Chet Lemon just for fun. But
Nice.
With that, that'll do it for this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next week. Again, potentially Wednesday night. We'll let everybody know. Follow us on Twitter at Assembly Call. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. All right. Well done, gents.
Sweet.
So, all right. Well, we managed to. I always feel like in the off season, if you can manage to get yourself an hour out of this, then it's important to it feels good to be able to squeeze an hour out of whatever content we get. But the Ed Schilling news was at least a gift that we were given over the course of the week.
Thanks, Archie. You're really looking out for us, buddy.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Who knows? But no, good stuff. Good stuff.
Let me see. Yeah. All right. I gotta go eat something. I'm starving.
There we are.
As usual.
There we are.
I know.
Now you're just rubbing it in. I hope Coach dropped off. You're just rubbing it in his face, and that's just hurtful. At
What's
this
going
point.
on with Coach? I didn't know.
He's having a medical procedure done that does not allow him. I forget how he phrased it last week, but doesn't allow him to eat, and as he said, will require him to make frequent trips to a certain room in his house. So,
Yikes.
Yeah. So anyway, but all right. Well, cool, Michael. Appreciate you stepping in and joining us.
Yeah,
Good
thanks
talking
for
to
having me on.
Thanks, buddy.
Enjoy
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys.
enjoy the rest of your summer and the actual heat that has finally hit us. And
Coming in hot.
have you again on soon.
All right.
Sure.
Later, guys.
So
See you guys.
thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody. We'll let you know about next week. And thanks for joining us tonight.